All right, good evening to everyone. Thank you for your patience. 40 minutes to go 8 miles coming into downtown in the middle of rush hour. Who knew? The public hearing for Baltimore City Public Schools before the Community Relations Commission for Baltimore City is called to order at 6:11. We have actually, I think, a pretty streamlined conversation this evening. For those who are possibly watching online, the purpose of these hearings is really to kind of gather information consistent with the CRC's authority under Article 4 of the City Charter. Particularly, it tasked the Community Relations Commission to address and to ensure that any discrimination in the city of Baltimore is eradicated and eliminated, and there are certain areas for which we have particular authority. That includes health, education, housing. Am I forgetting something? Oh, employment. So obviously employment. And so tonight we are glad to hear from representatives of Baltimore City Public School System to get a sense of how things are going. We recognize that this is a very dynamic time, particularly when it comes to issues and concerns of civil rights enforcement, issues of discrimination, lots of uncertainty in the space, particularly as we hear about potential changes in federal enforcement of civil rights law, particularly through the Department of Education. So with that, we want to just get an update and a sense of how things are going at city schools, and also to raise a few questions on some matters that have been brought to our attention. We think you're already aware of them, but we just want to get a sense of, are there continuing issues that might require or warrant more engagement and action from the commission. Tonight, there are three commissioners. Two of us are here. One is online. Commissioner Foster is online. Commissioner Nadine Finnegan Carr is the secretary to the commission. It is intended, while it is an official conversation, it is not, as I've said in other hearings, a gotcha conversation. It really is to kind of understand what is the state of things with city schools around, not just employee matters. Do we have issues with EEO complaints and the like, but also related matters, and I know we'll get to those. Some of those have to do with some transportation concerns that have come up over the last, certainly, I think, 18 to 24 months. So with that, we will begin by allowing the commissioners an opportunity to offer any opening statements that they might have. We're not going to prolong it because daylight savings time has started, and since we're going to be 1 hour short of sleep for the next several months, we might as well get as much enjoyment out of a good weather day as we possibly can. Certainly want to acknowledge Chief Danielle Burton, who is the staff liaison to the Community Relations Commission for the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. And with that, I will recognize Commissioner Nadine Finnegan Carr for any opening remarks that she might have.
Good evening, everyone. As a former Baltimore City Public School teacher and current commissioner on the Community Relations Commission, I am really happy to hear from Baltimore City Public Schools today. I'm looking forward to hearing the progress that you all have been making and what needs you may have that the Community Relations Commission could support moving forward. And with that, I will defer back to the chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Foster. You have the floor for any opening remarks that you might have. Are you unmuted on your end? I don't think we can. He's checking and. All right.
It says he's unable to mute himself.
He's unable to mute himself.
problem to do it. She knows how to do it.
All right. Commissioner Foster, if you don't mind, we would just ask you to hold your opening remarks. We can get to the presentation, and then once we get the technological issues worked out, we will come back to you for any opening remarks, maybe at the time of any questions that you might have. So this evening from the Baltimore City Public School System, certainly it's good to see Melissa Broom. We worked together some time ago when we were still doing some advocacy work together. I, as the political action chair for the Maryland State Conference NAACP, during a lot of the work, it feels like it's been a long time ago that we were working on similar shared issues in Annapolis. So it's good to see you this evening. On behalf of Baltimore City Public School System, I don't have my agenda up, so who's making the presentation? How are you? Good. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Yeary and members of the commission. I am Tina Highcupboard. I know two of you very well. I am the Chief of Communications, Engagement, and Enrollment for Baltimore City Public Schools. On behalf of Dr. Santelises and our Board of Commissioners, I want to thank you for this opportunity to come before you at such a critical time for both our city and our country. I know we are here to talk about fair practices and equity and compliance, but before we get to those items on the agenda, I wanted to set some context and a high-level overview of what's going on with the district. I'll just take a few minutes to provide that. I also want to acknowledge who is here with me this evening. So behind me here, I have Josh Sivan, Chief Legal Officer, Quinnell Gomez, Director of Fair Practices, Dr. Tracy Durant, Senior Executive Director of Equity, Emily Nielsen, our Chief Human Capital Officer, and Melissa Broom, who you've already acknowledged, Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs for the district. You can go to the next slide. So here on this slide, next slide. There we go. Thank you. Here on this slide, we just want to quickly highlight our strategic board priorities that the board has set that guide the work of the district. You'll see things like ensuring effective instruction, recruiting and retaining qualified staff, maintaining high-quality facilities, engaging stakeholders, providing equitable access, and increasing educational programming at our schools. You can go to the next slide, please. We serve nearly 77,000 students, 70% of whom are African American. It's also important to note that 74% of our students are identified as low income, with 15% as multilingual learners and 15% with students with disabilities. You can go to the next slide. Across the whole district, we have approximately 10,000 staff across 160 schools and programs, again, setting context. Our new teacher cohort, in terms of recruiting and staffing, we actively recruit and retain and supported qualified educators and administrators. You can see here at a glance different ways and pathways that teachers are entering into the district. 138 new teachers through our City Teacher Residency, Teach for America, or State Teaching Alliance. Our international teachers have been increasing annually. In 2022 and 2023, we had 40 international teachers. This year, we are at 116. Next year, at 25-26 school year, we're up to 150. And this is about recruiting qualified teachers from across the country, but also representing languages in our district that are currently needing support in our district. We have a 50% increase in our paraeducators and substitutes that are becoming teachers, which is a beautiful thing to see us growing our own teaching force through paraeducators. 75% of our incoming cohort identify as people of color. It's an impressive number. The last year's percentage was 67%. We can go on to the next slide. We're going to talk now about our recent progress and our blueprint investment areas for the district. Here we have the Education Recovery Scorecard, which just highlights the growth that Baltimore City Public Schools is making. This scorecard was released in collaboration between Harvard University, Stanford University, and Dartmouth College. And I don't usually read slides, but I just want to highlight a couple of things on this slide. City school students, we have the second largest growth in reading nationally since 2022. City Schools is one of 5 large urban districts that are performing better in reading than before the pandemic, and that's critical because the pandemic recovery was a real situation for us. We are among the nation's leaders in math recovery. We are in the top 25% of large urban districts nationwide who've made math improvements. And we have the second largest growth in reading in Maryland, one of 2 Maryland school districts that are performing better than before the pandemic, which is a point of note. I'm going to go to the next slide. And on NAEP, which is the Nation's Education Report Card, we have a test that compares us against similar large urban districts across the country. Our fourth graders doubled the growth of their peers from large city districts and quadrupled the growth of national students. Our fourth grade economically disadvantaged students increased math percentage by 10 points. And our fourth grade African American students increased their math performance by 8 points. So it's important to note that while NAEP, we still have room to grow. We want to celebrate our growth and also acknowledge we have room to grow, but it is remarkable to see the growth we're making so far. And next slide, please. Our kindergarten readiness, I'm very proud to report, while the state has not and continued the KRA, they're going to another assessment. We decided to continue KRA this year because we had seen continued growth on our KRA, our kindergarten readiness assessment. Between 21 and 22 and 23, 24, our kindergarten readiness scores improved 16%. 53.4% of city schools students who attended our pre-K, so our babies going into kindergarten, were ready by the standards of KRA. The Maryland percentage for 23-24, which is the comparison that we have because Maryland didn't take the test this year, was 44%. So Baltimore City Schools is actually surpassing the actual numbers of Maryland in their overall kindergarten readiness. And we've, like I said, improved by 15.67%, since the 21-22 school year. Next slide, please. Thank you. On our MCAP results, we've continued a 3-year run of improvement in English language arts, that's ELA on the slide, and math scores on MCAP during our 2023-2024 school year. Obviously, our students are getting ready to take their MCAP assessment for this current school year, so we don't have that data yet. We'll have that in the fall. But we wanted to just highlight that we're outpacing the statewide growth in both categories. City Schools math scores represented a 15.91% increase, the highest in the state, versus a 3.4% increase statewide. And Baltimore City's literacy scores represented a 6.54% increase over 2023 versus a 1.04% increase statewide. Our ELA proficiency, since I mentioned before the pre-pandemic, since 25-15-16 school year, the beginning of our CEO's tenure, has grown by 14 percentage points, outpacing the state's 8 percentage point growth during that same time period. And our math proficiency rates, 1.4 percentage point from 2023 to almost double this growth of the state from 23 to 24. And since 2022, our math proficiency in city schools has increased to 3 percentage points. Again, we acknowledge we have work to do and growth to do in our math and reading proficiency on MCAP, but we're making the progress when we see that continual growth over time. Couple other highlights: absenteeism and chronic absenteeism and attendance. We have been working really hard to decrease the percentage of students who are chronically absent. We've had a decrease of 5.4%. Just want to let you know that translates into 4,000 students who are not chronically absent as the year before. It's a significant increase. We have had a year-long focus on attendance, thanks to our mayor for our partnership and our Mayor's Attendance Award. Quarterly, we're announcing the schools that have had a decrease in chronic absenteeism, and last year it was an increase in their daily attendance. In total, with a 1.8 percentage points over the last year of our attendance, 30,000 students have improved their attendance over time. And we can go to the next slide. Here's a chart that just shows the absentee rate comparing to other large districts in Maryland and the increase in numbers. So here, the city schools, as I said in the last slide, decreased our chronic absenteeism from 2022 to 2023 by 4.0%, which is equivalent to 4,021 students. And you can see, I won't read the other counties, but we are holding our own in terms of the work that City Schools is doing around making sure our babies get to school, ready to learn and on time, and being able to be successful. Next slide. Our enrollment increase. So as other large urban districts across the country, as well as in our own state, are seeing a decrease in public school enrollment, we are pleased to say that this year we have seen an increase of 1,031 students coming to city schools. It's a positive trend that we're really excited to see. In the pandemic years, we saw a 0.5% decrease, a percentage decrease, and now we're seeing an uptick. I want to just acknowledge that Latino student enrollment has contributed to the acceleration of our student enrollment, and we are working very diligently to support those students as well as they join City Schools family. For the next slide, please, our Blueprint investment. These are the dollars we're investing in arts programming. I want to highlight 3 critical areas of investment that are a direct result of Blueprint for Maryland's Future. For those who may not be familiar, the Blueprint is a result of years of work by our Kerwin Commission in Annapolis and determines how Maryland's school funding formula works. When the Blueprint was passed, it was historic. For the first time, concentrations of poverty were acknowledged in the formula, with the resources being driven to areas of the state with the highest need. For us here in Baltimore City, that has meant being able to provide things for our students that we have not been able to provide before. An excellent example of this that you'll see on the slide is arts teachers. Prior to the Blueprint, we had just 174 art teachers across the entire district. Today, we have 309 teachers across the district. And next slide, please. Another example in our investment is our gifted and advanced learning. We want everyone to know that in 2024, we had more students of color enrolled in AP courses than we've ever had enrolled in the past. The total number of unique students enrolled in AP classes was 4,014, up from 2021, which was 3,074. And students of color enrolled in AP course last year was 3,379 students. So you see on this slide, there's lots of other data points I can highlight, but the point here is that we are working very hard across the district to have equitable access to gifted and advanced learning for all of our students. Next slide, please. In the area of athletics, athletics, we also have seen that thanks to the Blueprint, we've been able to invest significantly in middle school athletics. We hadn't been able to before. We saw a 114% increase in team participation and a 105% increase in registered athletes. We know the critical role that athletics play in giving students reasons to come to school and a well-rounded school experience, helping students become self-actualized and really find their purpose and reason for being. Thank you for my time to give the quick overview. I am now going to turn this over to Quinnell Gomez, Director of Fair Practices, to discuss our Fair Practices work with the district. Yes.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Quinnell Gomez. I'm the Director of Fair Practices. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's my first time. It seems you're familiar with my colleagues. So I will try to be as concise as possible talking about my department. I'm not sure if you have the slides, but it will be on the next one. So our department really highlights City Schools' commitment to non-discrimination. And in our department, particularly Fair Practices, in the next slide, you'll see most of all the policies that we oversee. And it's really those policies are related to non-discrimination towards students, employees, any third parties, offenders, contractors, and so forth. And so on the third slide, if we can keep going, I can talk a little bit more about all the things we do. So we are responsible for resolving any form of complaints that come through our office. Usually it's complaints related to employment discrimination or any form of discrimination. And so we have to resolve those, investigate those. Then we're also the overall functioning of City Schools' equal opportunity compliance. We also serve as the City Schools Title IX coordinator, so we assist we work and collaborate with schools themselves whenever those types of cases come in, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And we also identify and address any barriers to reporting or systemic challenges to implementing our policies. We also provide training to staff and administrators, as well as support students and staff in accessing fair treatment and services. And I will be remiss if I didn't also include, we also respond to all requests for reasonable accommodations. On the next slide, we're going to talk about some of the responses to our complaints. We provide support to whomever, whatever department or school is needing to figure out these complaints of discrimination. So our key role is providing support and investigating complaints of discrimination, whether it's filed by a student, employee, or any stakeholder, based on any real or perceived characteristics. And some of the ones that are listed, we're familiar with: race, religion, sexual orientation, gender, and so forth. I'm really proud to say that this year, and starting in the fall, we unveiled a new enhanced training for our staff. It's an all-staff fair practices training that that staff can do remotely, virtually, consisting of 4 modules focusing on, of course, equal employment opportunities, student and student bullying, and then support for religious diversity and LGBTQ plus students. We also provide fair practices training for managers and supervisors on student and student bullying. We do those in person as well, so an enhanced version of the already virtual trainings that we provide. And then we also do specific trainings related to student and student bullying, but within the context of special education for IEP chairs, because those can be a little different, right? And then on the next slide, I did provide some data on some of the things that come through our office. So this one is particularly for 2024, and we submitted this in our compliance report, which is linked there if you're interested in looking at the numbers and the breakdown. But really, this is the breakdown of the total internal EEO complaints, so anything that comes through our office through fair practices, and then the external complaints are complaints that employees file with other external agencies. So this slide also provides data within the breaking it down in the protected categories, because that's what we really want to see, right? Where are they falling? What number do we need to get down? Where are we seeing the most traffic coming through our office that people have concerns about? And so this data really captures that by each of the protected categories and what we typically tend to see. On the next slide, we do have the student bullying and harassment. And the reason why this comes through our office is because bullying can also be related to a real or perceived characteristic. And so when those things, cases that involve bullying related to, motivated by a protected category, our office is informed, and we provide support on that as well. And so this is the overall number for all the bullying in the district, but in the next slide, it really captures sort of the protected category elements, all of the elements. And we have it similar to the employment context. These are the breakdown of all of the categories that we saw last year. And in terms of filing a complaint with our office, this is our contact information. So typically our complaints come through our EEO inbox, or questions, or anyone that needs support, they can contact us through our email, they can call us directly, and they can also contact us through our website. Typically, it's very visible, and I don't know that people have any problems reaching us, but that's the way to reach us. And I think that is the end for my presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Tracy Durant, Senior Executive Director in the Office of Equity, and I'm going to give you a very condensed version of the work that my team is responsible for. Next slide, please. So in 2019, our district, city schools, our Board of Commissioners adopted our equity policy. This policy was informed by the work of a cross-sectional strategic equity task force that included internal and external stakeholders. And that policy was unanimously adopted, I would say, in 2019. The office started in 2018. Prior to 2018, there was not an equity office. I think it's also worthy to note that in 2018, that team was a team of one. That the policy was adopted in 2019. As a part of policy ADA, we have these 4 standards, which you can see on the screen, which include disrupting and eliminating systemic inequities, honoring culture, experiences, and humanity of students, families, and communities, ensuring access and representation in academic programming, and building staff capacity for equity-based teaching and leading. At the beginning of our work, we focused heavily on standards A and D so that we could help colleagues across the organization build capacity they needed to lead from their respective areas of influence. Next slide, please. As part of our initial work, we developed guiding questions for the application of an equity lens, which are before you on the screen. We ask all members of our city schools community during policy development, during budget development, during the work of school equity teams to utilize these equity lens questions. Next slide. As a part of the policy, there is a section on compliance, and so annually, schools and offices are developing their equity priorities at the school level that is aligned to the annual school performance plan. As a part of compliance, we also established an equity advisory committee that includes members of the organization representing parents, alumni, community stakeholders, school-based staff, and district office staff. We just seated a new equity advisory committee, and their job is to make sure that we are doing the things that we set forth as part of Policy ADA and help us to monitor progress towards implementation of the policy, as well as weigh in on new policies and policies that will be amended. And annually, we submit a report to the board by August 31st to ensure implementation of the policy. Next slide. So I think it's important for you to know that we have grounded our equity success in an educator's personal connection, the institution's ability to embrace change and progress, and then what practices teachers and administrators do every day. Next slide. As a part of that work, we engage in professional development across the organization, both schools and central office, consultation, as well as strategic planning. Last year, school year 24, I would say, we had over 150 equity professional development touch points, 1,300 consultations, and 800 strategic planning sessions. It is also important to name that what we do also requires us to be in direct collaboration and cross-functional work with all of the offices across the organization. We spend a lot of time with our colleagues in academics and schools and legal and human capital. Next slide. So earlier I mentioned alignment to policy. So as a part of our consultation work with other offices, as new policies are being developed and or again amended, we are asking that they be aligned to policy ADA. And so we work very closely with those offices to make sure that there is alignment to the policy as well as the application of an equity lens. Next slide. Our Equity Advisory Committee, this is just a snapshot of some of the policies that they have influenced. So as part of our policy development process, members who are building out new policies across the organization come before the Equity Advisory Committee. They give a presentation about the policy, the justification for policy revisions, if there are any, as a part of the normal stakeholder process before policies go before our policy committee and then ultimately voted on by the board. Next slide. So as a piece of the work that is led from my office, we have our Be More Me program, which is an initiative that began under Dr. Santelisa's leadership that has been funded by Gates Foundation. And at the time of its inception, you can go to the next slide, please, I'm sorry. It was aligned to our blueprint pillars of literacy, wholeness, and leadership. As a part of this, there are writing fellowships for students, there are teaching fellows, there are monthly huddles with students, there's a student design team, so all of the youth programming that includes our quarterly speaker series and our annual student conference are led by a student design team. That design team designs the entire program from beginning to end. They determine what the themes are, they determine who the speakers are, they determine the venues, they do the event planning, they do all of the setup, they do all of the facilitation. They often invite leaders from the district to come as observers only. We are not allowed to participate. They meet 10 times a year to design and facilitate those. We engage several hundred students through our speaker series and our student conference. Our speaker series is held in various places throughout the city, most recently this year at Coppin State University and Lexington Market. And our student conference for 4 years has been held at Morgan State University, and that is an event we do in the spring. So Chief, if you could go to the video, thank you. So I did want to share, it's just a brief 2-minute video from last year's speaker series.
This is my first time using WebEx. I'm a Teams person. I don't do WebEx, and and this is a whole new thing for me, so I'm trying to figure out how.
I appreciate you trying to do. I mean, it is the center of what we do. So anytime we get to see reactions from the babies, I think it's worth waiting. So, but I certainly defer to
So
you
that's what
all.
I'm trying to figure out, how do I stop it from? Just give me that. Not give me what I want to.
There you go. Click that. That's
And that's here. And that's why, tell Randy to come down.
Well, we can keep going and then come back to the video if we have someone who can troubleshoot for us. We can certainly send it to you afterwards. I just thought you would enjoy it tonight. Okay, we will figure out how to get you to see it.
Yeah, but I want to make this thing so I can see where it says to stop sharing. Oh, that's where I am. Sorry.
Nope.
That's what I'm trying to figure out, how to stop sharing.
We'll come back to it.
Okay. Okay, so I'll keep going. So the next area of work that I want to talk about is our work with educator pipelines and induction and our Equity Center Principal Initiative. So we were awarded a grant from the Wallace Foundation in 2021, a 5-year grant funded in order to help us make sure that we were developing an Equity Center pipeline based on the demographics of the students that we serve and the demographics of our leaders. We are in year 4 of that grant. The first 2 years of that grant were all but guaranteed, and then years 3, 4, and 5 you only get after you have successfully moved towards the deliverables. And so we are at the end of year 4 and making more than satisfactory progress to continue our work. Could you go to the next? You can go to the next one. Thank you. So as part of that work, the Educator Pipelines and Induction Team is a team of individuals that include senior principal coaches. These are individuals who support our early career leaders as well as people who are aspiring to the principalship in city schools. It is important to note that all of our senior principal coaches, there are 4 of them, are all former principals from city schools. So they understand Baltimore City, they understand city schools, and understand how to navigate them. This year, our current pipeline includes those who are emerging leaders. These are teacher leaders. These are people who may not be assistant principals yet. They may not have the Administrator 1 certification yet, but are interested, know that they have their eyes set on the principalship. And so we are working with that group of individuals. We have resident principals, which I'll talk about a little bit in a few moments. And then we have other candidates who may have tried to pursue the principalship and for one reason or another were unsuccessful. So we make it a point to continue to work to develop those individuals because we are going to need strong principals. We know that the success of our system and our schools and what happens in terms of student outcomes and academic achievement is really about how strong the leader is. And so we want to make sure we have support systems in place to support them. As a part of the team's work, they conduct pipeline visits where they are walking with leaders, they are observing their practice, they are giving them on-demand coaching, feedback, and support. Next slide. So the the Educator Pipelines and Induction Team works with assistant principals who are in their first, second, and third year, as well as principals who are in their first, second, and third year. And so what we've shown you on the screen is how that team's work is impacting our organization, both at the assistant principal and principal level. You can go to the next slide. In partnership with our friends in the Office of Enrollment, Engagement, Enrollment, Chief of, I got it, Communications, Engagement, Enrollment, I got it. as well as our schools office and our human capital, we are working very closely together to manage our selective hiring and placement. And so we are helping those aspiring leaders participate in their mock interviews that they will have to participate in with their school family community councils. We are working very closely with our principal supervisors and our coaches around the support that those individuals need, and collaboration with human capital, and working to build out a leadership tracking system that will allow us to appropriately match the best candidate to the school that needs them most. Next slide. So we have started a series of Aspiring Leaders events. Last February, we held an event. This past March 1st, we held another event. We actually held one in the fall as well. Last year, there were about 84 people who registered for that event. We had 67 people who attended. In the fall, we had 100 people attend that event. And just this March, we had over 80 people attend our Aspiring Leaders events. It is important to note that they came from varying places. They were not just from Baltimore City. There were people who came from Virginia, from New York, from New Jersey, indicating to us that Baltimore City is a place that they want to be. Next slide. As a part of Educator Pipeline support, they are, again, doing coaching. There is a cohort model, which I think speaks to the success of the program. They do a lot of preparation. They bring in outside experts. There are monthly PD sessions, networking opportunities, professional development, and we launch everything with the summer onboarding in July. Next slide. And this year, we launched our own internal residency program. So we have our own job-embedded approach to leadership development, which is aligned with the concepts of equity-centered leadership. There are 10, we can accept up to 10 candidates. There's a very competitive application process. Each resident gets a dedicated coach. They get job-embedded support. They have a mentor principal who is someone who is highly effective in our organization, and they too participate in monthly professional learning. That's another video that we will get to you. So next slide after this one. Again, yep, thank you. So our school support model, we actually have a school support team of specialists. They help school leaders achieve the goals that they have set forth in their school performance plan and their equity action plan through what we call a school equity action team. Members of that team include the principal, other leaders in the school. They sometimes include our community school coordinators. They can include educational associates. They can include social workers. They can include parents and students. The composition varies by school, but it is based on what goals they have set forth in their school performance plan and equity action plan. We have a group of teacher leaders who are called Equity Fellows. This group convenes quarterly, and then a major event at the end of the year where they are also getting development because they are the liaison between our office and the schoolhouse. They engage in that professional development to make sure that the school is working towards the goals of their equity action plan. Next slide. So over the years, we have expanded the schools that we are prioritizing, and that is based on a core team of individuals attending a prerequisite seminar that we have as part of our equity work. And so right now we are working in close to 100 schools that have a specialist assigned to them. I think it is also important, I mentioned that when we started the office, when the office was started, there was one person in 2018, and now the team, there are 18 of us. And so I think that is a reflection of the board and the CEOs and the senior leadership team's investment in our work of equity. Next slide. So highly engaged schools, these are the schools that meet between 6 to 8 times a year with their specialists. So they're meeting about every month with their specialists. And what we've noted about this group of individual schools is that 44% of them increased their star rating last year, 56 sustained, and none of them decreased star rating. So it draws some alignment to the fact that what we are doing, working so closely with them to achieve their school performance plan goals, are yielding this particular data. Next slide. So again, I mentioned the Equity Fellowship. Those are the specialists and the director who supports them, and they focus heavily during the Equity Fellowship on building staff capacity. So one of the things is, I think it's important to note about how we view equity in our organization. Equity is not, there is an equity office. There is a equity policy, but the work of equity is the work of every single office, every single person across the organization. So this building staff capacity piece is our focus. It is about not having supervisory responsibility over every single office in the organization. It is about them having capacity to do the work that is theirs to do. And so what our fellows say is that they feel very comfortable applying the tools that we give them, and they utilize them often. And then the next slide are just some quotes from our fellows, which I won't read to you. You can read on your own. And I think I am done. Thank you.
Thank you for a very detailed presentation. Certainly, we will spend some time and revisit what you presented here, but I'm sure there are a couple of questions that each of the commissioners might have for you. Before we do that, I want to make sure, are we able to get Commissioner Foster? Are we able to hear him?
We're able to get him. He's still on here. He's still here, and he is, I'm trying to unmute him, but he needs to unmute himself. There we go.
All right. Commissioner Foster, good evening. You have the floor if you want to make your opening statement and then ask any questions that you might have based on the presentation. The floor is yours. Is the volume up?
It's all the way up.
All right. We'll try it again.
He's not muted on my end.
All right. Commissioner Foster, I don't know if you're able to unmute. If you are muted, we'll try. When you think it's open, go ahead and say something. Tina Hike Hubbard, you may not want to go too far.
Melissa's gonna cover.
She's going to cover for you.
Melissa's got my back.
She's got your back.
I've got children to get to.
Okay, get to your kids. Be careful. Thank you for being
You
here.
might have to elevate his status to presenter
In
in order for him to be allowed to unmute himself.
He's unmuted.
Oh,
And you see his little green microphone, but we can't hear him. And then that's what.
Well, that's all right. We'll figure it out, and maybe if there are, if you can communicate with him, if he's got any questions he would want to raise, we can do that. Commissioner Finnegan Carr, you're recognized for any questions you might have.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for an amazing presentation, very thorough, and but it did give me a few new questions, which I think you all should be able to answer. So I am very happy to see the increase in teachers and the coverage that you've been able to get, both through the new teacher cohorts and the international teachers that you have been able to reach out to. That is very impressive. I do have a question about all of the, especially our international teachers, as you've been integrating them in. Are there concerns related to their visas and their status under the current administration moving forward for next year?
Hi, good evening. My name is Emily Nielsen. I'm the Chief Human Capital Officer. Our teachers are here under J1 visas and H1B visas. Right now, at this time, we don't have any reason to believe that there are going to be issues with their visas, although I know other folks on H1B visas, there's been a highly publicized case recently, so we're actively monitoring and working with our staff to make sure that they stay in good standing.
Thank you. Similarly, I'm very happy to see the gains for your kindergarten students. and hopeful that pre-K and other programs are able to continue to be funded as they funnel into city schools for kindergarten. Also glad to see the increase in school enrollment. That is very impressive that school enrollment is increasing in city schools. I know that the census of Baltimore is increasing, so that really does demonstrate that not only are they coming back to Baltimore, but they're coming back to Baltimore City Public Schools. They're not enrolling in private or parochial schools in the same numbers. So I appreciate that. I do have a specific question for Quinnell. I don't know if I pronounced that incorrectly. But could you, you went through your reporting information for discrimination complaints, for bullying complaints, which are primarily in the purview of you all as they are the student and youth. But as far as the discrimination requests, the staff discrimination requests, what are your reporting guidelines for those requests to external agencies? So I know you mentioned that some are requests that staff make on their own to externally. So,
Yes.
But when they are internal complaints, is there a reporting policy for those to either OECR or to the Maryland Community Relations boards? Like, what is your
Yeah, on our
policies?
policies, it gives them, it lists out other agencies that they are able to file their complaints with.
So for your internal ones, do you report numbers out annually as well to any of those boards?
Not to my knowledge. Do we? Publicly, we do through our compliance reports, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It didn't surprise me, though, that disability was a top issue
It
for both
is,
staff and
yeah.
students.
It definitely is.
It's something that we are always seeing. And then my last set of questions are for Dr. Durant, or last question. I know that previously there was a high transiency rate among new principals, and it seems as though you all have put a lot of effort with your selective hiring and placement and your support pipeline. And what would you say is the impact of that on the success of the principals and subsequently, of course, the students?
So I think that it is important to name, and Chief Nielsen, if you want to add anything, you can. I think that it is important to note that a lot of the, I would say, decision-making right now is in terms of hiring and placement. So one, we've done a lot to tighten up, if you will, the process of how we place to start with. And that placement, we are working very hard and very closely together to make sure that leaders who have certain characteristics are assigned to and selected for schools where they can best serve the student and community population. The other thing I think that is helping with what we are seeing with our principals has been the work of our schools office and our principal supervisors. So what I did not mention, so thank you for an opportunity to do so. What I did not mention was, as we are working to develop our aspiring leaders, we are working very closely with our schools team, with our academics team, with our principals who are beyond that year 3 in terms of their development and their capacity building, as well as principal supervisors. Because the other thing that we've learned, and our CEO has been very focused on, it's not just what happens with the principal, it is what they are getting from their principal supervisors in terms of support, coaching, mentoring, evaluation. And so we're working really closely to make sure that we are doing our best job from a central office perspective to make sure we are building the capacity of all of those individuals, to include central office teams who have to support school leaders.
Right.
The other thing that I think is important to name is that our CEO has been very clear, especially in our current cycle as we get into the next school year, to make sure that we are looking very closely at data in schools. So if you're a principal in a school, there's an expectation that data is going to move. Even if you had to spend time working on the culture and climate and safety, which are all responsibilities of the school leader, you also have to be moving outcomes for children. And if you are in a place and you are not doing that in the way that is going to help us accelerate across our organization, you might be moving to somewhere else, or you may no longer be a principal in city schools. Did that answer your question?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And my last statement is to have 92 of 160 schools be your priority schools for equity right now is amazing. So great job to you for that. And I will yield to the chair.
Thank you. Have we worked out Commissioner Foster's audio issues?
I can tell him, see if he can try again, because he's green, and the live stream can hear him, but we can't.
All right, we can't hear him in the room.
Yes.
All right.
Everyone else can.
All right, Commissioner Foster, we're going to keep working on it. Hopefully, we'll get it worked out. And if you've got something that you want to ask, we can certainly relay it if that'll be helpful. Again, thank you for the detail in the presentation. Certainly, there's a lot of information that is here. There are a few areas that I noticed were kind of omitted, particularly when we're talking about issues of equity. I didn't hear anything about student interactions with schools police, what those numbers look like, what are the types of interactions are actually taking place. I think that would be important data for us to be able to also kind of understand around certainly a number of the issues that would relate to climate. And so I know at a prior hearing that we had around particularly public safety, there was an outreach to city schools to have a representative, and I think you may have been in a leadership transition with the department at that time, and so we did not have an opportunity to hear from any of the leadership of schools police. So if there are equity data points that are related to the schools police function, it would be very helpful for us to be able to have that data and kind of understand the context. The other is I didn't hear, and I don't, maybe it's not an issue, but I do know that the concerns around immigration enforcement around schools is a big thing. And I don't know if that is presenting itself around any of the city schools. If so, to what degree? What effect is it having? Is it dampening the attendance and the response of certain groups of students? I didn't hear any reference to that in real time. I think that would be particularly important. And then the last one, and whoever wants to respond to any or all of these three, feel free. Some time ago, there was a study about transportation issues with Baltimore City Public Schools students, particularly female students who rely on MTA to get to and from school, particularly around issues of alleged sexual harassment. Haven't heard anything. Are you getting reports of that? Are there still concerns about that? Have there been conversations around those issues? And if so, to what degree? There's been a lot of conversation amongst the commissioners trying to really get a sense of where we need to direct our concerns and our queries about it. Of course, as we've heard recent media reports, one about timeliness of transportation and students being on time to school, some of them missing critical instructional time. I think all of those kind of play into a major concern for the commission, but also to kind of get a sense of where city schools leadership is on these particular areas that were not, I think, spoken to specifically. If they're referenced in other data, we're happy to kind of make that connection. But if there's anybody who wants to speak to any of that, I'm happy to hear from you.
Hi, Josh Sivan, Chief Legal Officer. Let me take those in turn. So school police, we'd be happy to provide additional data. Let me just give a little bit of background for anybody who might be watching. We have this Baltimore City's schools police force is part of the school system here, which is unusual. We have policies and general orders that apply to our police. It's very clear there, and also in our MOU with BBD, that police are to be used not for school disciplinary matters. The police have a youth and student engagement team that meets with the police regularly. We also do a school police report card where we survey students every year, and that data shows positive trends in terms of our engagement. We recently established a community relations commission to formalize the police's engagement with. Commission is not the right word. That's you. A community relations unit. Yes, community relations unit. I was to focus particularly on engagement and focus with our school communities. And so, if there are additional detail about that, Chief Jeffrey Shorter has recently come on board and is doing a lot of work to make sure that the police are appropriately deployed, responding to incidents of safety and violence, but also doing it in a way that's collaborative with our police force and making sure that the police are particularly focused there. So that's on the police piece. On immigration enforcement, and I think this is important. We have not heard of any enforcement efforts in our schools, but we understand that our community is very concerned, and we are concerned to make sure that we are supporting kids and that we are making sure that all kids in our community, regardless of their immigration status, have an opportunity for education. So to prepare for that, we have put up a lot of resources on a dedicated website. We've also engaged in a host of trainings for our principals, our community school coordinators. Most of our schools now, I think all of our schools now, are community schools. So those are people who are specifically tasked with connecting families with resources and made resources available, particularly to newcomer families and families more generally. And we've distributed a host of one-pagers and also trained front office staff because they're on the front lines, and had very clear protocols that we reminded schools about in terms of how we engage, and particularly what we don't do. We don't collect information about immigration status. Our staff are not required to report to any ICE or federal agencies, and we have clear protocols for anybody who comes to our schools to make sure that they have a proper purpose for doing so. So we've been acutely aware and trained, but that also is consistent with our overall insistence on all students being welcome, regardless of immigration status, but also regardless of any of the protected classes, and making sure that we are welcoming communities regardless, and that we are focused on educating the students that are a part of our community. That's 1, 2, and 3. 3 was transportation. So just to back up, to give an overview of transportation of our students. So our Office of Student Transportation, and Dr. Lonette Washington apologizes that she couldn't be here today, but operates and provides services to about 5,600 students every day. And those students are served with a mixture of our own school buses and contracted school buses. Those are largely students that have a particular need for transportation, and that ranges from students with a disability who have transportation on their IEP, to students who are homeless, to students who are zoned for a particular school but live further than a particular distance away from that school. So that's the transportation that we do. But the vast majority of students in Baltimore City, which is distinct from other jurisdictions in Maryland, but typical of other urban areas, are served by MTA, which is separate and distinct from us. And by legislative directive, MTA provides that service out of its own budget to our students through bus passes and the like. We do have a collaborative relationship with MTA, and when issues arise, we raise them. We also collaborate on routes. I'm logging in to just make sure that I stick to what Dr. Washington has said and not, but very, hold on one second. So collaboration to ensure that students have accessible transit options, that we're identifying high ridership routes and evaluating their efficiency, making sure that on safety matters at both transit hubs, but also high traffic student areas, to the point that the commissioner or the chair raised previously, and also aligning our bus and rail schedules to align with start and dismissal time. I should mention that our students don't just use MTA buses, they also use the light rail, as many of you have seen in terms of light rail stops around particular of our schools. And also making sure that we're monitoring based on ridership data and incident reports, to the point that you raised. And so when those issues come to us, we follow up with MTA, and they've been very collaborative of focusing on and escalating issues that we raise with them.
Since we're on transportation, and thank you for that, about how many students rely on MTA?
So I don't have those numbers, but if we have about 75,000 students, and we're transporting about 5,600 students, so we're thinking about primarily middle school students and high school students are riding. So it's the remainder of the population, but it's a majority of our middle schoolers and high schoolers that don't have their own transportation or the family transporting them.
And middle school, high schools start their day at about what time?
It ranges in terms of my high schooler starts at 8 o'clock, and my middle schooler starts at 7:45 or 50. She always gets me because I never quite remember it in terms of getting her there on time. But that's just we have various, and one of the things in terms of maximizing efficiency is our buses often do multiple routes, so they have to come back to get multiple students, and we are trying to maximize efficiency of that limited resource. Right. It also plays into the choice process, right? Because at the high school level, certainly, and the middle school, there's a degree of choice in terms of where students go, and making sure that students have options all over the city, but also recognizing that we, as Baltimore City Public Schools, don't control transportation for the vast majority of our students.
Right. And the reason I ask that is, as the commission has been considering what kind of follow-up, particularly around the transportation accessibility, but also the safety of Baltimore City Public Schools students. The start time of schools and the availability of the schedule, particularly with choice. If you're on one side of the city and you're going to a school that you've been selected for on another side of the city, that's going to significantly affect your start time, what time you leave home. Depending on the time of the year, it could mean that you're leaving home before the sun comes up to be able to access the system. And that's where I'm trying to get a sense of, we know MTA has police, we know Baltimore City has police, we know city schools have police. And my concern is, at this point, I will state it as a concern, is there a certain amount of vulnerability that our students are having to take on because of the mix of transportation systems they rely on, right? And who's moving early in the day, who's monitoring, pathways from residences to transit stops, train stations, bus stops, and the like. And so it might be just as we're thinking about how to follow up. I'm not looking necessarily for an answer tonight, but wanting to put it on our radar, that when we consider that, we're making progress. Your report is significant, and we do not take that lightly. But I want to make sure that we don't forget that there are some factors that we really need to be pretty certain about, at least in terms of how we're coordinating. Certainly, it doesn't necessarily fall all to city schools. I don't even think most of it does. But if there is some advocacy and some outreach to make sure that our students are safe as they're using whatever mode of transportation is available to them, it might be helpful for us to put that on an ongoing conversation.
And we appreciate that concern and that commitment to follow up, and we'd welcome a conversation with MTA and the like. I know that the City Council recently had a conversation with the MTA administrator and some of our staff, and welcome the Commission's engagement in that issue. I should say, if I didn't mention it before, one of the functions that our school police do involve themselves in it is if there's a particular issue at a particular school in dismissal and follow-up, our school police are acutely coordinating with their compatriots in other law enforcement agencies to try to address, mitigate, and ensure safety for our students.
Right, certainly. And of course, with that, we appreciate what our public safety officers do, but a lot of times it's in response once something has occurred, and certainly wanting to make sure that we put as much safety on the front end before we actually have an issue, and if that's a coordination challenge that we may have with the available resources that we might be able to assist with, or at least better understand what's going on, it would be very helpful. But thank you for
Absolutely.
your answers. Ms. Gomez, if you don't mind, just because you had some data that I think goes right to a lot of the core of what this commission does on a regular basis. And I was wondering, we had complaints or internal and external charges of discrimination filed in fiscal year 2024. Yes. Do you have year-over-year data? Do you do comparative data to be able to see what the trend lines look like?
Yes.
Are you seeing any trends in the data beyond what we have here for the 1 year that might be of concern or interest to the commission?
The trends are pretty typical for what, since I've been here, it's usually complaints about disability, accommodation, and race and gender. Those are typically our highest.
If it is
numbers.
possible, just as you've given summary data here in terms of the protected categories, if you have some look-back data that will help us to kind of see what the trends are,
Sure.
That will be helpful. On the retaliation, this one kind of sticks out to me.
Sure.
What types of retaliation generally are we sensing in those complaints?
So retaliation is really interesting. It's usually tagged onto a different complaint, right? So someone can be making primarily a race-based report, but they would include retaliation based on things that may have happened during the course. And so I think typically the types of retaliation we see or that we can actually look into are things like really poor breakdown of the relationships, and that causes a perception of retaliation at least. And so if someone files a complaint, whomever it's against may engage in behaviors that give the cold shoulder or things along those lines, treating them a little bit differently. They're feeling a little out of place, and so they would add that to the complaint. And that's generally what the tone of the retaliation complaints are that we receive.
Okay. And typical time frame to when you're dealing with internal complaints, how long is it typically taking to process those to some sort of resolution? Do you have an idea?
It depends. We generally try to do it within, 30 days, 45 days. But each investigation is different, right? As you can imagine, we're a large school district. And so, and there are a lot of implications, right? We take it really seriously, people's livelihood, and the environment itself. And so because of the seriousness we take it into and we want to do a really thorough job, it can go longer than that. For example, we can have an investigation that requires interviewing or that has 50 witnesses, right, versus one that's pretty straightforward that has, the two parties involved. So it would depend.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. All right. How are we? Yes,
Can I
please.
add one more
Certainly.
one more trend?
Certainly.
So we've also seen on the student side, we've seen an uptick in bullying complaints, and we do have data on that. And I think one of those reasons why we've had an uptick is because we've had a real priority on training and education for students. So we now have, and I'm just feeding lines, we now have, through the efforts of Director Gomez and our staff in our wholeness office, posters up in every school with how to file a bullying form. We've done work with our parents. We've done work with our teachers. So we feel like we're getting the word out, and that increases. Obviously, there should be a plateau, but that's important. We've also seen an increase in cyber bullying, and we're starting to do some significant work, and we're continuing really work about making sure that our schools have tools to address that, but also that we're taking some significant work on reforming our cell phone policy in schools to restrict access to phones in schools to address that as well.
That's very good. Yeah, let me know how that works out. You got.
Do you want me to ask Commissioner Foster's
Sure.
question?
Sure.
Okay. So we have a few questions from our commissioner that is online that he was able to type into the chat. I'm going to start at the bottom only because it was most recently asked. So first of all, Commissioner Foster does state that he is honored to be here and sorry that his remarks cannot be heard. But his last question, starting from the bottom, is related to the policing questions and also transportation. And specifically, you did mention that school police, when they're aware of something, to respond at, either at the beginning of the day or the end of the day. But what are the protocols of the responsibility between when school police should be involved versus MTA police if it's transportation, or Baltimore City Police, and what are the steps of that coordination? Do you have that available?
Sure. So we have an MOU with BPD that provides the overall infrastructure and architecture for that collaboration. And so that's a very important piece. Then practically, our police, BPD, and MTA are making sure that they're coordinating on jurisdiction. So MTA is taking primary responsibility for things that happen on buses. We're taking primary responsibility for issues that happen on school property and in our schools, and BPD for the remainder. And then there are particular issues where BPD will have jurisdiction over a particularly high-level crime that happens on school property.
Mm-hmm. Just piggybacking on that, specifically related to MTA police, is there any form of training that you are aware of that happens, especially since so many of our students are taking MTA, for MTA police on working with responding to our students?
I know there's extensive collaboration, and we can follow up on the particulars there.
Thank you. Okay. And then in terms of Commissioner Foster's other questions, this one is related to the chronic absenteeism that you all have been able to reduce, but what is the plan to continue to make progress within that area?
So I'm, and I see the last two, well, the first two questions, so I can respond to both of them,
Perfect.
if that's okay. Do you want to repeat, do you want to read the other one too?
So I'll go ahead and read the second one
Okay.
for those who are out there in cyberspace. The second question is related to the current federal position on DEI and whatever plans or discussions are in place to continue Baltimore City Public Schools' progress within that area, because you all have been making really good progress.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Commissioner, for the questions. So what I will say is that the work around chronic absenteeism in our organization, both attendance and chronic absenteeism, are priorities in the organization. We are working to better understand the root causes. I think one of the things that happens with chronic absenteeism is we think we understand why young people are not coming and why they're chronically absent. And what we're learning is there's more work for us to do to understand those root causes, because if the root causes are flawed, then your response is going to be insufficient at best. We are making considerable progress and have hopes and all indicators are that we will continue to make progress, and we want to accelerate and make faster progress, to be completely honest. One of the things that I think is important is some of what is happening across the organization includes our continuous improvement strategies. And so we have teams of people who are dedicated through basically a case management strategy that allows them to provide in-person support. We're looking at the chronic absenteeism, we're looking at the data, we're looking at the barriers to make sure that our strategies are going to be in response, and we're actually going to see the change that we so desire. The on-site model, we're rolling it out with about 96 schools right now, and we're working on reports again to better understand. I do think it is important around chronic absenteeism, as well as other things that we are working on in the district, to name the impact of the blueprint. The inability to have resources to do some of the things we want to do will impact our ability to respond. It will impact the strategies that we put in place. I think we are working really hard to make sure that our schools are places where students want to be, both from a culture climate perspective, school safety. Not only that, but the curriculum and what happens academically. Also, our investments in athletics, our investments in the arts, our investments in wellness and social emotional learning. Those investments require resources. And so whatever the impact of the budget is across our state and across our district may have also have impact on what we are able to do based on what we're planning. I hope that answers Commissioner Foster's question for now. The second question, well, the first question around DEI, I've been getting this question a lot. What I can say to you is I'll go back to what I said in terms of where we were in 2018 with me and now a team of 18 people. We have seen no indication in our district right now that we are planning to cut positions, that we are planning to cut our work. We are being very responsive to the things that are coming down from the federal government in terms of executive orders and DEI to make sure we are compliant and doing all things legally. But as Chief Sivan said, as Chief Sivan said, we are fully committed to still doing what we need to do to serve all of the students in Baltimore City Schools. That is our goal, that is our charge, and we are not changing course. Now, if you ask me that question tomorrow, that may be a different answer, but that's my answer tonight.
Just while you're there, coming back to the chronic absenteeism question from my perspective, student homelessness is also sometimes a driver. I do know that it was mentioned that some of the internal transportation provide services to homeless students to make sure they can get back to their schools of origin no matter where they end up. But can you speak to us about what might be done, what else might be done as far as the chronic absenteeism and homelessness?
So I will turn to Chief Sivan and see if you have more information than I do. I am not prepared to answer that question. I do think there's a response we could give you officially from the district, but it looks like Chief Sivan may be able to weigh in a little bit more. Thank you.
And that's also something, if there are more numbers that we can receive back.
Sure, and I believe it was last night, although I'm losing track of time, that our homeless department presented to our board's policy committee because they're doing some revisions and enhancements to our homelessness policy, and they provided data so we could follow up and share that presentation with you all. We have increased our staff centrally that are dealing with supporting homeless students, and they also work with a school-based homeless liaison in every school in the district to support students. We have partnerships with a host of agencies to support our homeless students. Over time, we've had, for instance, summer camps particularly supported and tied into some of the shelters in the area where our students come from, as just an example. And I think we've really been attuned to homeless students' transportation needs. I don't know how much you all know about the process, but under federal law, if a student presents as homeless, we are required to make what's called a best interest determination about their school. And one of the factors in that best interest determination can be transportation. So aware of and working very closely with families, and also on an annual basis updating to look at issues like absenteeism, access to all the services a school requires, and make sure that we're serving and families have options and understand the different schools that may be able to serve their child.
Thank you. And just really looking forward to seeing that data especially interested in knowing what your point-in-time numbers are for homeless students that will probably be embedded in that report.
And we'll also add in our compliance report, which we annually report on homeless data, so you can see those trends over time.
Thank you.
With that, I just want to check, and I don't believe we have any, do we have any members of the public online? It looks like it's all staff. All right. One, again, let me thank all of you for your presentations. I do have, it's probably a bit unscripted, but I'm not going to let Melissa Broom off just that easily. Policy-wise, is there a sense of, I know the General Assembly is in session, is there a sense of any potential changes that might occur in Annapolis this year that would have anything to do with what's going on with city schools in the equity space that we might need to be aware of?
Thank you for the question. It is March and we have 20 days left in the legislative session, so I appreciate you asking about where we are. These are sobering times in Annapolis right now. It feels just uncertain every day with the climate, the economic climate at the federal level, and the way our state is impacted in a way that's different from other places due to our proximity to DC. And I share that just because this comes at it. So we're facing a $3 billion deficit already, the state, and the blueprint that we've referenced several times tonight is paid for through next year, but that changes after next year. So there is legislation right now being considered that as drafted, would pause certain elements of the blueprint. And as drafted, as introduced, one of those elements that would be paused is the funding for concentrations of poverty schools. We have 20 days left. The House has moved that bill and restored the funding to the high poverty schools. The Senate is expected to do something with the bill by the end of this week. We expect it to be different, and then we expect negotiations. You know and understand that well. So I guess, the most important thing for you to know is that we, as city schools, are have been very vocal about how critical those poverty, the concentrations of poverty funds are to us. So much of the work that you heard discussed tonight is a result of the funding that comes from the state. It just is. So we will know more in a few weeks. We are doing our best to keep making the case for how these funds have made a difference. All of the points that Chief Hike Hubbard laid out at the beginning of our presentation about moving students both academically and through the investments we've been able to make, these are because of what has happened with this bill that passed several years ago. So what we have said to legislators, and we will say here, is that this is not the time to pull back on those investments. We are moving a needle, and this is not the time to pull back. I say all that, and also it would be irresponsible of me to not acknowledge the position that the state is in as our elected leaders and governor have to make tough decisions. So we'll see.
If you have a list of bills that are still somewhere in the process that you think we should kind of be aware of, and then we can have internal conversations about what we might do to follow up. If you can provide those, I think that's
Sure.
probably one of the more time-sensitive things that
We'd be glad to.
we can do to follow up.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you. All right. It's 7:33, and I can't tell if it's still daylight outside or not, but we're not gonna belabor any longer what has been a good conversation. Again, please relay the commission's appreciation to Dr. Santelises. Let her know that I missed seeing her. I know she's got a lot going on. We also know that there's a lot going on with city schools, in city schools, and it's beyond the data that's been presented, which has been quite helpful. To all of the thousands of folks who come in to put young folks on a trajectory where they can explore their dreams in Baltimore City, we appreciate that work. We know it is often underappreciated and sometimes even unappreciated, but we want to certainly relay our appreciation as the commission to all of the folks at Baltimore City Public School System for the work that they do. But we also know that you can't do it alone. And so part of this hearing was to really kind of get a sense of where things are, what's going on, what's working, where there are some concerns, and how we might be able to support. And so we know that there'll be some follow-up. Generally, and then I'll leave it to my colleagues to give their closing remarks. For the purposes of public hearings, we usually leave the public record open for 7 days after the hearing if there are questions or comments that want to be or need to be added to the record. There may be some follow-up from the commissioners. Some of the conversation, we've identified that there's some follow-up, and so Chief Burton will be following up to make sure we get those things kind of laid out. And if there's a need for us to have other less formal in terms of an actual hearing, but conversations to make sure that we're making progress on the things that are really, really important that we've shared tonight, we want to make sure that we get that done. That will be my closing remark, and I'll yield now to Commissioner Finnegan Carr.
So I will actually turn on my microphone. I will actually use Commissioner Foster's closing remarks as mine. I will echo them, and he states, good evening to you all, and thank you for your time and thoroughness. We truly appreciate it. Thank you.
And so with that, Commissioner Foster, thank you for your participation, albeit under a bit of a challenge, but it's been an important conversation. If there's any follow-up, you will hear about it in the coming days, and continue to do the work that you're doing. Thank you for being present tonight. And if there's nothing else, Chief Burton, anything? All right, very well. With that, the public hearing for Baltimore City Public School System before the Community Relations Commission tonight is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Get home safely. Have a good evening.